The following is a program of the Santa Barbara County Education Office. To learn more, visit sbceo.org.
I'm Susan Salcido, Santa Barbara County Superintendent of Schools, and I am so excited to introduce our guest today, Edwin Weaver, the Executive Director of Fighting Back Santa Maria Valley. Edwin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
I can't wait to dive into all of the work that Fighting Back Santa Maria Valley is doing, which is intense and immense and great. But where I'd like to start with you is at the beginning, your childhood, background, and where you grew up. Will you please share?
Yeah, I'm from Virginia, a long way from here, a little town called Catharpin, Virginia. You can tell if you're not from there if you say Catharpin.
Okay.
And I'm the youngest of 6 children. My mom and dad were civil servants. They worked for the Department of Agriculture. That's where they met. My dad is a veteran of World War II, and my mom started her career out as a teacher. She was going to be a math teacher. And her mom was the local lunch lady, and she raised 4 children after her husband had died in a rock quarry accident.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I think service has been in our blood. My brother is a teacher, and my sister is a substance abuse counselor. My other sister works for the Department of Agriculture. And so we all have the service kind of gene in us, I think.
Definitely, clearly. And did you say you're the youngest of 6?
Yes.
And you grew up in Virginia, the small town of which I won't pronounce.
That's fine.
Because I will be...
You get it wrong.
Exactly. But you did not stay in the small town for college.
No.
You moved. Talk to us about your college career.
Yeah, so Catharpin, Catharpin's outside of Manassas, Virginia, which is it was a small town then as well. And I wanted to move to a city, so I applied and got into George Washington University, so it's 7 blocks from the White House. Big difference. Wow. And then all of my peers who went to college with me, they were from all over the East Coast, and a lot of international students as well. So I was exposed to a lot of different folks in the city. It was a big difference.
What are some of the things that you noticed right away after moving?
You could stay out till 3 in the morning and stuff was open.
There are things to do.
I remember there was a hot dog stand and everybody would stop by on the way back from doing, going out with your friends, and it was open at 2 in the morning. That was insane. And I was into skateboarding at the time, and so we would skateboard through the city of DC, which is pretty quiet at night, except for, places that cater to folks who are out.
Yeah.
And,
how fun and electric, too, in terms of being in D.C.
It was very exciting. And then my dad worked still in D.C., so we would have lunch every Friday, which was really great.
That's really great. Before leaving the small town, I just wanted to ask you, did you live, I'm making a complete assumption here, farm, rural, agriculture?
Yeah, I grew up on 26 acres.
Okay.
You would call it a gentleman's farm. It wasn't a true farm. We were surrounded by cows. We had a dairy farm really close to us. But yeah, it was very rural. I mean, we drove trucks and we had horses and 3 dogs and like 15 cats, and yeah, it was a lot of fun.
I love it. I love knowing that about you, Edwin. And so when you went to college, what did you study and what did you intend to do after college?
Well, I went in thinking I was going to be a teacher, which I went in to be like my idol, who was my wrestling coach in high school, Coach Baird, shout out. And the way it worked at GW is that you had to teach a subject in your second year. So sophomore year, I taught genetics at a local high school called the School Without Walls. And I realized that during my experience, there was a young man who actually got arrested on his way to school. And I'm like, where's Joseph? I'm going to use Joseph as his name. Where's Joseph today? And they said, oh, he got arrested for carrying a gun on the subway. And I'm like, that's crazy. He's not the kind of kid who would carry a gun. So I actually went to his house and found out that the reason he carried a gun is he felt unsafe. And I thought, that's what I'm interested in. Why is it that a young person who's in 9th grade feels like the only recourse they have is to carry a gun to school.
Right.
And so I switched majors. I became a psychology major. I realized I didn't want to teach genetics. I didn't want to teach biology. I wanted to be with kids and try to help them be successful in a different way than a teacher could.
Yeah. So a teacher in a different way, and a supporter, and being still of service
Yes.
in a different way. So did you say psychology major?
Yeah, I was a psych undergrad.
And so did you utilize that major right away?
Well, it's funny. I actually got recruited by a group called Young Life, which they work with high school students. And my first, I was actually volunteering at Sersham Quarter, which was the largest housing project in Washington, D.C. And they offered me a job working at a homeless shelter. So at the ripe old age of 20-something, I started my first job working on Belmont and 14th Street on the corner there. It was the first homeless shelter for families in Washington, D.C. So this was back in the 80s. And I learned a lot about kids and about poverty and about how important school is and how important it is for the system to work. And it was very frustrating to me because kids would go to Young Life camp and come back to make changes, and the system wouldn't let them. You know, their parents, unfortunately, would say, usually just the mom, would say, go out and continue to sell drugs because we need the rent money, or go out and sell your body because we need the rent money. And it's super frustrating, and that's when I decided I wanted to be a social worker because my hero, Deanna Durham, had her MSW. So I headed west and enrolled in Fuller Seminary, and I got my master's in theology from them, and then to UCLA and got my MSW. And it was during that time I learned about Child Protective Services.
Okay, well, I was going to ask you, how did you get to the West? But it sounds like...
Well, it did involve the girl.
Oh,
So
well, then we have to pause.
We have to pause because
Yes.
the real motivation of any young person. So yeah, while I was at the shelter, I was asked to go pick up a summer intern, and she missed the airplane. And I'm like, what kind of human being misses an airplane? She knew what time it was going to leave. So I didn't get to pick her up, but then I met her the next day when somebody else brought her in, and I saw her coming down the stairs of the shelter. I was actually wrestling with a couple of the teenagers, and I looked up and I thought, that's it, I'm done for. And
Wow.
so her name was Julie, and she came for the summer, and we dated that summer, and then we dated long distance, and then she was going to go to grad school in LA as well. So we ended up there and getting hitched, yeah.
That is a very charming story. That's the real story
The real
of how
deal.
Edwin got to the
Yeah,
West
it just
Coast.
took me about 1.5 years to talk her into it. I was ready, but she needed a little time.
I love it. I love it. So you both were in Los Angeles, it sounds like.
Yes.
Yes. So how did you go from Los Angeles to Santa Maria? And I know there are many stops along the way, so please stop where you'd like to stop in terms of sharing where you've been.
Okay, so I was in LA for a while, and then I worked for DCFS, and Julie taught in East LA. She taught at Sheridan Elementary School. But then my parents were getting older, so we moved back to Virginia. So I did CPS work there, Child Protective Services work, and then my local church asked me to come on staff with them. So I did, and then from there I got recruited to be a senior pastor in Kansas, of all places, a small town called Bonner Springs, and did that for about 3 or 4 years. And then I got called to pastor a church in San Francisco. And so I did that for about 3 years, and then once that happened, that was not working out. I decided I didn't want to pastor anymore. I really like social work. And so I was recruited by Santa Barbara County to be the Assessments and Investigations Supervisor in North County. So that's here in Santa Maria. So that was 2010. So that's how I got to Santa Maria.
Wow, that's how you got to Santa Maria. And Julie, your wife, is still a teacher, I understand. It just happens to be teaching here in Santa Maria.
Yeah, she teaches at Sanchez. She loves it. She's got a great team, a great school. They're doing a lot of wonderful work there at that school.
Wonderful. So let's talk about fighting back Santa Maria
Sure.
Valley. And I want to weave in some of the things that you've experienced in your past in a moment. But let's talk now about the actual organization and what is its mission? What are some of its goals?
Sure. Its mission is to achieve to partner with all members of the community to achieve resiliency against substance abuse, reduce incidents of violence, and promote a safe and healthy community. That is a big mission statement. So when I took over 5 years ago, our main focus was truancy prevention. And we had in the past been a drug and alcohol prevention agency as well. So we kind of stepped that up a little bit over the years and really focused in on why do kids turn to drugs and alcohol? Why are they self-medicating? When we talk to parents and to young people and to students, it really is a lot of other factors that are turning them on to drugs and turning to use drugs as a way to cope with today's problems. And so we started with the thing I know best, which is foster youth. So we have a program called Foundations for Success where we help foster students with their educational outcomes. In California, students who are in foster care graduate at a rate of 48%, and the average of the rest of the population is 85%.
Right.
We were happy to say last year we got our seniors to graduate at a rate of 83%.
Incredible.
So we're really excited about that. We provide them a mentor who walks with them through schools. We've got it covered K, now that Hancock has their program, K through second year of school, with a support system outside of the school that can come in and look at how they're doing, see what supports they need, and then provide them with the love and care of an outside adult who can kind of plug in and really advocate for them. And then we also do drug and alcohol prevention. We do truancy prevention still. We're really happy of our partnerships there. We do 2 bullying programs, one at the elementary school and one at the high school. We provide a lot of parent support. We have 5 different curriculums we teach in the evening for parents. I'm trying to think, and I'm going to miss somebody. And we work with our homeless population. Unfortunately, Santa Maria has a large homeless population, mostly families, and so we provide those families extra support to keep their kids on track because we know how hard they're working to get their kids educated.
Fantastic. I know it's hard to say in just a few minutes several of the programs, and each of those you could take a whole half-hour show and talk about each. And I do want to come back and touch on a few of those. But you just ended with the homeless support,
Yeah.
and we were talking recently about some new work that Fighting Back is excited about.
We're really excited about working with the Housing Authority. We received a grant to the homeless Emergency Assistance Program grant. We applied for it and were awarded some money to purchase a building and provide a transitional age youth shelter. So that's a shelter for formerly foster and homeless youth 18 to 24 years old. So we're really excited about it. We're in escrow on a building really close to Hancock. So we're hoping that our 18-year-olds who are in high school can move in there if they're homeless and then go and finish up at Hancock. That's really the goal. Yeah.
Fantastic. It's so great to see the organization evolve really under your leadership, truly. Absolutely. So earlier you talked about so many of the different paths you took, to get to where you are today, but one of the things you discussed was Child Protective Services.
Yeah.
And that's a really intense, important organization. And if you could say a little bit about the work, but also how does that work impact what you do today?
Sure. So Child Welfare Services is what we call it here in our county. And so whenever somebody's concerned that a child might be being abused or neglected, they're the agency that goes out and investigates and decides how to keep that child safe. Hopefully it's in the home. But many times they have to remove that child from the home to keep the child safe with the intent of returning that child after whatever the factors were that or risk factors are ameliorated. So that was amazing. I did that for 4 years. I have a great respect for the people over there who continue to do the work. But one of the things I kept running into was many of the conversations that I had with families were sounding very similar. Substance abuse at a young age for the adults, right? So they started using drugs and alcohol at a young age, or an untreated mental health concern, or domestic violence in the home. And then the impacts of the students, of the kids. So really when I started at Fighting Back, the hope was to get in front of that. When the board asked me to quit my job, that was very secure, and to come lead a nonprofit, the most attractive thing was maybe that we could actually get in front of these families and help them before all that happens. Right. And so that's been our focus.
So really proactive rather than react to
and
something.
And prevention, and yes. And so really trying to figure out how can we support families who are struggling? How can we support them in raising their students to be successful citizens of our county and our state? And so I feel like we do a really good job. We could do better. One of the things that I learned, though, there was the effects of trauma in learning. When Nadine Burke-Harris, who is now our Surgeon General, we're very excited about that.
First ever in California.
And she wrote the book, The Deepest Well. And she spoke it here in Santa Barbara County. We're really happy to have her. But her research shows that when students have adverse childhood experience, there's things that happen to them when they're children, it affects them now and throughout their lifetime if there's not things that we put in place to help them. And so one of the things she found in her research up in San Francisco was that if you had a score of 4 or more, you were 32 times more likely to come to school with a learning disability or a behavioral problem. Well, unfortunately in California, 17% of the population has a score of 4 or more. So that's 2 or 3 kids in every classroom. Right? So what we've done is we've partnered with the Trauma Resource Institute to use their model, the community resilience model. And that's a set of 6 wellness skills that we can teach teachers and parents and kids how to regulate their somatic response to stress. Now, it sounds really boring, I'm sorry, but it is really a lot of fun. The kids love it, the parents love it, everybody who we teach has loved it. So at the high school, we've taught all the counselors and all the APs, and we're working on getting the word out. Behavioral Wellness is adopting it as their model. So they're going to adopt both the community resilience model and the trauma resiliency model, which is a therapeutic model. So we're doing that training on the 10th and the 17th for all of their staff at Behavioral Wellness, both South County and North County. So we have, at my office, we have about 9 trainers who can go out and do trainings at any time in English and Spanish and Mixteco. And so I'm really proud of that work because I feel, again, if you're resilient and if you can stay calm in a stressful situation, you're less likely to hurt your children, you're less likely to turn to drugs and alcohol for a coping mechanism. And I feel like the founder says it's the democratization of mental health, really getting mental health services in the hands of the people who need it most.
Edwin, that is such important work. Truly, it's so impactful, and the fact that your organization's taking a lead and partnering with other organizations too is fantastic. It's something that doesn't just affect students, but it really, as you take those ACEs surveys, you said score of 4 or more, it's 4 out of 10, right? And the adults in our system also often realize that they have scores of 4 or more too. So it really is a healing or an opportunity to look at both our youth but also adults in a systematic way of treating adverse childhood effects.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. I just got back from Atlanta. So the Trauma Resource Institute asked me to go to Atlanta to teach at Emory University. And one of the men I was teaching is a pastor, a chaplain. And he said he was talking to his bus driver. And he was using the skills, and he actually helped the bus driver who was going through a very difficult time right then and there, and the bus driver felt better. It's very amazing what you can do both to adults and kids.
And so, were you saying one of the 6 skills?
Yeah.
So, what are 1 or 2 so we can all take away a tip today?
Okay, so we're gonna do it right now. You
all
ready?
right, I'm ready.
So. I learned this model called the community resilience model, and one of the things we talk about is being in your resilient zone. So your resilient zone is anything that, any state of being that you're your best self. So you have ups and downs, highs and lows, but you're thinking clearly, you have access to your prefrontal cortex and everything's online. And so what we want to do is keep you there. And so the way we do that is we teach you 2 skills. One is called tracking and resourcing. So I'm going to ask you to notice what's happening in your body as we talk. Okay, so that's tracking, just noticing what sensations you have. So I want you to think of something that gives you hope, joy, peace, or strength. Is there anything in your life that you can think of that?
My children.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to pick a different one because children can be complex. Sometimes they make us angry, sometimes they make us happy.
My work.
Okay, okay, let me ask you this. Okay. What was the best day you've had this year?
Best day
or
I've
a great
had.
day?
I had a really recently great day.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Tell me about that day a little bit if you want to share.
Yeah, it was a recognition of some veterans who graduated recently.
Okay, so you're at the ceremony. I want you to visualize it. And as you do, I just want you to notice what's happening to your body as you talk about it.
Mm-hmm. I'm sitting up taller. I'm really excited. Mm-hmm. And so that's probably the awareness piece.
Right, so tracking is the awareness. Mm-hmm. Resourcing is thinking about that thing that's positive in your life. So what we teach young people to do is that they start feeling out of their zone, high or low. If they'll just spend a few minutes noticing the things that they have, gratitude, right? So that thing that they have in their life, it could be real or imagined, because some of our young people can't think of anything real. And they focus in on that, their nervous system resets. It's as simple as that. And so we teach that as well as some other skills, including emergency skills we call the Help Now skills, to help them.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you
welcome.
for going through that practice with
You're
me.
welcome.
How did I do?
You did great.
Okay, excellent.
How do you feel?
I feel great.
Do you feel better?
I do. I feel really, actually, it really is nice to be able to pause and be mindful of
Yes.
what you're grateful for.
Exactly.
And you know, as you just said, some youth have a hard time finding even something
Yeah.
to be happy about, and so are grateful for. So I think that's a really important exercise, and that's 2 of the 6 skills, but
Yeah.
really important work that's happening statewide,
Yep.
but countywide.
Well,
and-
internationally. Actually,
and
Tribe's doing it all over the world.
Fantastic, fantastic. Let's go back to the organization of Fighting Back and schools,
Yeah.
and talk about some of the deep partnerships you have with some of our school districts in Santa Maria Valley.
Yeah, we have the great opportunity to be partners with our Santa Maria Joint High School District, the County Education Office, Orchid Union School District, Santa Maria Bonita Elementary School District, Guadalupe. We're working with them, trying to get out there, and in Sisquoc and Cuyama, we're trying to help as well. We consider all that our valley.
Fantastic. Really important. The majority of the student population
Yeah.
is here in the Santa Maria Valley, so
Right.
the support you provide to the schools is really important, truly, and
Yeah.
impactful. One of the other partnerships, I was just talking about partnerships,
Yeah.
one of the other partnerships that I want to call out is
Yeah.
that one time I called you to say, you know, we have a meeting with all of the 20 school district superintendents. I'd love to partner with you
Yeah.
to come in and talk about e-cigarettes, cigarettes, and vaping.
Yeah.
Such an important issue and topic for people to understand. Do you want to say a little bit about that training?
Well, first, a shout out to your office. So last year, we realized when Juuls came on the market, most people don't know that we've reduced tobacco smoking immensely in this country. I
Right.
mean, we were all smoking, and young people included, at a rate of about 60%, and gotten that down to about 4%, which is amazing
Wow.
public health strategy, and kudos to all the public health people that made that happen. And then these e-cigarettes showed up about 5 years ago, and so we got back up to about 14 to 15% of youth using them. And then we started chipping away at that and reducing that. We were real excited, got that down to 7% the last time we surveyed the young people. But then Juuls was invented, and it's a very evil company outside of San Francisco that market to our children. They're trying to get them hooked on nicotine. And so it went back through the roof. So we went to you and said, hey, could we use some of the money that we get from tobacco tax and spend it on hiring somebody to go out and educate folks on this? And that's Edith Perez. And so she's been able to educate over 850 people I think, no, it's more than that. I got the wrong numbers. That was with Crim. But we educated a lot of folks on the dangers of vaping in their community. And so it's an epidemic. And unfortunately, what's happening is our young people are hijacking and hacking those pods in the e-cigarettes and putting THC, which is marijuana. So cannabis oil and THC products. And I just heard of a young person who had opioids in her e-cigarette. And so it basically has become a universal drug delivery system that our young people are using. Parents aren't aware of it. They think it's harmless. They think it's water, and it isn't. It's going to cause cancer. We're going to find out in about 10 years that everybody's using these products are going to end up with lung cancer, and then there's not going to be anybody to sue. It's very tragic what's happening to our society right now.
Edith's presentation provided by Fighting Back through all of what you just described is really powerful, and I really have appreciated, and I know the superintendents of the districts have appreciated her presentation, her availability, and the importance of her message. And she actually brings items so that people can see and understand and touch and smell what it's all about, because there are assumptions that they're not dangerous, that they seem like syrups and candies and things like that. So really appreciate that work. It sounds like it's a new lane for Fighting Back.
It is, and it's an important one.
It is an important one.
It's amazing. I'm just sad for our kids that they have to be exposed to this, but I'm happy for all the adults who are really trying to help them.
Yeah, absolutely. We have so much to discuss, Edwin, but one thing I really want to call out to the attention of those who are viewing is the fact that you are not only a leader, but a leader who reads voraciously. You love to read, I understand.
I do.
And how did you get that love of reading in you?
Well, my mom being a school teacher for 1 year, That's another story. She read all the time, and we always had books around the house, and so I've always loved to read. I mean, I'm going to say how old I am, but there was only 3 channels growing up, and so there wasn't a whole lot on TV, so I turned to books.
That's great. And it sounds like you read like I do, sort of like channels on TV, which is you have multiple books going at one time, and
Absolutely.
then I turn to different ones if I change my mood a little bit. So what are some of the books that have been recently on your nightstand?
Well, I just read Michelle Obama's Becoming, and I got to actually hear her in LA, and that was fascinating. I loved reading her story because it sounds a lot like of our kids and our community story. And so I was just so happy to read that. I was inspired by her. I read Father Greg's Barking to the Choir, Father Greg Boyle down in East LA. I'm trying to think what else. Oh, Kamala Harris's biography. I just bought it, haven't started it. And then Nadine Burke Harris's book as well on The Deepest Well. It's really fascinating. And then Elaine Miller-Karras' Building Resiliency is a really important book.
So it sounds like you read for your own interests, background autobiographies, biographies, other books as well.
I love the Roosevelt series by Morris. There's 3 books around Teddy Roosevelt, and I just finished a murder mystery by Horowitz called The Word is Murder, and that was a really interesting book.
Really interesting book.
Yeah.
I love that. So Edwin, you have worked here in the Valley for many years, and your influence and impact that we discussed today is very wide and deep. And I have a question for you about the youth coming up in our schools.
Yeah.
And we talked resiliency, we talked about issues, we talked about things that they actually have as assets in our Valley as well. As you think about the youth in our schools, what are some of the skills that you think are really, really important that they have as they're growing up and coming out of high school and into Hancock College or other colleges or in the workforce as well? What are some important things that we're really intentional about teaching our youth?
Well, I think that's a great question. I think there needs to be a balance in all of this, and I think there needs to be a balance between advocating for self but also understanding that work is work.
Yeah.
I had to show up to work today even though it was raining, even if I had a headache or a sniffle, right? And there are parts of my job that are a lot of fun, and there are parts of my job that are actually not so fun. But because I like the fun parts, I have to do both. And I think grit is a really important part as well. And so the ability to find something that you love and stick to it, and even when it becomes difficult, even when you fail. I've failed miserably at many things that I've tried. I just was explaining that today. I worked from November to recently on this project, and it's not going to happen. And I'm just heartbroken about it. But if I hadn't tried, it wouldn't have happened. But it failed. So, oh well. I got to dust off and get up and try again.
That's right.
And I think that's a skill that I found, even with my own children. If they have that tenacity and that grit, it will serve them better than maybe even talent and skill. And so I'm really instilling that in our young people to really get that effort going and continue in it.
Well, thank you for that message for our youth. I think that's very, very important. And thank you, too, for the contributions that you make as a leader and the organization makes on the community and county. You really are influencing and impacting countywide, and appreciate the new work that you're taking on, these new lanes, and the evolution of fighting back under your leadership. So, Edwin, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome.
I'm Susan Salcido, Santa Barbara County Superintendent of Schools, and thank you so much for joining us today for this edition of Local Leaders.